and welcome to Killing Color, our first episode in 2021. Still, I guess, Happy New Year.
Right?
It still feels fresh, especially after the year we just had.
Oh,
so,
boy.
yeah, I hope that this year turns out to be much better for you and your loved ones. We're remaining, positive and optimistic and, just want to make the best out of everything. One thing that was really good in 2020.
What?
It was the amount of support that you have given us. We are new podcasters, brand spanking new. And we tried something out with this concept that we have, Killing Color, and very surprised at the reception that it got for the 2 episodes that we put out there. So I definitely think that it's a good idea to keep pushing this vision forward into 2021 and, see where it goes from there.
Yeah, Brandon. I know we made a few resolutions at the start of the year. And there were so many things we said we're just going to leave we're going to leave in 2020.
Right.
But one thing that I know that is really important to us and a lot of our listeners, one thing that we are taking into 2021 and we're going to take in forevermore is the stories of the victims and the people who are affected, whose story we tell through Killing Color. So Thank you guys for just hanging in with us.
Yeah, it really means a lot, and you don't even realize it. So, all I gotta say now is, without further ado, I'm Brandon.
And I'm Tori, and this is Killing Color. So, today's case that we're going to cover is the story of Kendrick Johnson.
Now, that name sounds familiar, but can you remind me who Kendrick Johnson is?
Yeah, so actually, the first time I think I remember hearing about this case, or maybe together, we actually heard about it together.
I think we did.
We're listening to one of our favorite true crime podcasts, Crime Junkie.
Yes.
Shout out to you guys. And we heard about this case, but we just thought no way. There's no way that they're telling us everything. We have to cover this case ourselves and research it ourselves.
It seemed very just really out there, and I know whenever you bring up some more of the details, I think our listeners will most likely agree with that.
Most definitely. So I guess we can just start off with who Kendrick Johnson was.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay, so Kendrick Johnson was born October 10th, 1995, and that really stuck out to me, Brandon, whenever we were doing the research for this case, is because he is so close to our age.
Yeah, actually, you're kind of young, but yeah, he basically, someone that we would have went to school with, in our same grade or maybe even a grade above us.
Yeah, so I feel like just that alone made this case not so much more real for me, but so much more real for me. He was so young. Okay, let me get back to it. Kendrick Johnson was born October 10th, 1995. He was an honor roll student, and he attended, what high school did he attend?
Was it
Lowe's High School?
Was it Lowndes? Lowndes, It's in Georgia, right?
In what part of Georgia?
Well, I thought it was Valdosta, but I guess it's Valdosta. Our Georgian, listeners can
reach out to us and tell us how to properly pronounce this.
Yeah.
But no, and the reason why I refuse to say the name is because I cannot pronounce it. Lounge, the way it's spelled, I'm just...
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, because it's spelled like low and an Ndes, but I think it's Lowndes County High School.
Yeah, so y'all don't roast me. But yeah, he was an honor roll student. He was also an athlete. And he was described by his family as the laughter and joy of the entire house. His friends and family described him as a sweet and quiet boy. So he was just your average all-American teenager.
Yeah.
So the Johnson family was a very close-knit family. So on January 10th, 2013, Kendrick went to school just like any other day, and his schedule was packed. He had a lot of classes, and some of his friends said that they all had planned to attend the freshman basketball game later that evening. So people started to get alarmed when Kendrick didn't show up for his last class, which was a weightlifting class, and he didn't return home. So his mother, Jackie, around 9:30 is when she started to worry. So she said that she went to search his usual route that he takes to get home from school. She checked around the house, she checked around the school, and when she didn't find him or there was no sign of Kendrick anywhere, she became concerned and she called the police to report him missing around 12:30 a.m.
Wow.
The Johnson family, they went for the rest of the night and the rest of the early morning with not knowing where Kendrick was. There was no sign of him. He hadn't contacted them. And the police had no idea where he was either. So on Friday, January the 11th, the school day continued and students went to school, and it started off like any other school day, except for a group of students. They were in their gym class, and they said they were taking a survey that their teacher or instructor had given to them. So they were sitting on bleachers, taking a survey, and that's where they discovered Kendrick's body rolled up in a gym mat.
Now, wait a minute. Rolled up in a gym mat?
Yeah, so the students, they said that they saw out of their peripheral vision, they saw something white sticking up out of a gym mat, and they noticed it was socks sticking up. So they went over to investigate why were there white socks sticking out of a gym mat, and when they got a closer look, they discovered it was a body, a dead body inside of the gym mat. And I know you're thinking what do you mean a gym mat? Because I was like, what do you mean a gym mat? So have you ever seen in high school wrestling how the wrestlers have this thick heavy mat that they actually wrestle on? So there were multiple of these at this high school, and they were usually rolled up and stored in the corner for storage.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, and they were usually stored up and down, long ways vertical.
Okay, so they're standing up in the middle of the corner or something okay.
Definitely.
So a whole bunch of
Yes, so
imagine, you're just in gym class and then you see some socks sticking up out of one.
Yeah.
And that sounds pretty terrifying, actually.
No, definitely. And they actually reported they were so freaked out,
I can only imagine.
I mean, exactly. So the instructor rushed over, and once everyone, it was the consensus that there was a person inside of the mat. So once the instructor was about to try to unroll it to help whoever it was inside of the mat, she or he quickly realized that the person was deceased. So the authorities were called, the school was put on lockdown, and that person, the deceased, was identified as Kendrick Johnson.
Wow. That is such a bizarre and depressing turn of events. So right out of coming from winter break, and starting off the semester to going missing and then being found dead and at the school. And the most bizarre thing, and I think I know why this was familiar, as we, started going through things, because even before the Crime Junkie episode, I think I remember this when we were in high school, hearing about this, and I never really looked that much into it, but you hear the story of a kid found dead in a gym mat at a school, and that type of stuff, doesn't leave your memory, know?
Yeah.
So what happened? Because you said the authorities came in and everything like that. Let's go through some more of these details. What did they say? How did he die?
Well, Brandon, let me just tell you. Let me just tell you the facts, okay?
Okay.
So, there was actually security cameras in the gym, right? There were several security cameras. Okay. And the last time Kendrick Johnson, he's affectionately known by his family and friends as KJ. Okay. So we can refer to him as, that's his nickname. So the last time KJ was seen alive, we can tangible evidence where we see him on security footage, CCTV, walking into the gym around 1:00 p.m. on January 10th. Okay. And the cameras caught his last moments. They show him walking around the gym, and then he walks out of. I'm sorry. This is where I get a little confused. Okay. There are several cameras, but they show him walking out of frame to the right, and that is the last time Kendrick Johnson is seen alive. So an investigation is launched into the death of Kendrick Johnson, and his cause of death is ruled as accidental positional asphyxia. Okay, so what the hell is accidental positional asphyxia? What is that? I've never heard of anything like that before. So basically, it's just like, first of all, it's rare. Okay, it's very rare.
Okay,
and it's almost,
sounds like
it's almost never been recorded. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So basically, it's just saying like the position that someone is in, it like whatever position they're in, it hinders their breathing so much so that it causes death by asphyxia.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's dying because your eyes upside down?
Or you don't even have to be upside down. Maybe you're in such a twisted position that, you can't breathe correctly. It doesn't necessarily mean you're upside down. But your position, whatever position it is, it was so horrible or just so complicated that it compromised your breathing.
Okay.
Yes, and they ruled, I think the coroner came to this conclusion, or the investigators came to this conclusion, is because the position that he was found in, his body was found in. So like we said, he was found upside down in a vertical standing mat.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the theory is, so let me just tell you about these mats really quick, okay? Because like me, everyone was like, what you mean? Why is he in a mat?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the students said that in order for them to avoid paying fees for lockers, they would like put their gym clothes, or they would store things inside of these mats so that they wouldn't have to pay locker fees. Yeah. So the police, the investigators, they conclude that Kendrick was, okay. Now let's get to the facts here, okay? So below Kendrick was a pair of was a shoe. Okay. So you had the shoe. I'm trying to paint the picture so you can imagine it.
Okay.
The mat was straight up and down. Kendrick is inside of the mat with his head facing the floor. Okay. And one of his arms was extended as if he was reaching for this shoe that was, at the bottom of the mat on the floor, and one of his arms was beside his body. And on top of him was a hoodie and another pair of shoes. So investigators say, he was just trying to, he was probably 9 times out of 10 trying to retrieve his shoes, his extra articles of clothing, whatever, at the bottom of this mat, and he got stuck, and that's how he died. That's what they say.
I'm sorry. So what you're telling me is, okay, I can believe that some students, maybe they didn't have it like that and they didn't want to pay for locker stuff. Let's put
it innovation.
It's I mean, there's another word for it. Let's call it hustling. You know what I'm saying? So I can believe that. I can believe, like, hey, let's, put these, in this corner. I mean, nobody's going to really figure out, and we'll know where to get it because we know where we put it.
Right.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
I can believe a lot of students did that. But what I cannot believe is you're telling me this honor roll student who was, like, pretty good on the basketball team, what you're telling me. There's 2 things that you're telling me by this theory. Not you, but what they're saying. Mm-hmm. They're telling me that this kid was stupid enough to dive head first into a mat in a corner of the room to retrieve the shoes that were at the bottom of the ground. They're not like midway through or whatever. So you're telling me he was stupid enough to jump all the way in. How he gonna get out? Mm-hmm. How would you get out if you did something like that? Yeah. Now that's what comes to my mind. Yeah. I don't know about anybody else. Yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, let me go and get this or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anybody with common sense would say, let's move these mats out of the way, or flip them over and get what, because they're on the ground, they're not locked in a mat. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying, so that's one thing. And then another thing is you're telling me that I have to be stupid enough to believe this bullshit theory of being uncomfortable, being stuck in a hole, was the way that he died. Now, that is, I don't know. That doesn't work for me.
Let me just say one thing, Brandon. And your sentiments are echoed by his parents. They were echoed by people who reported on the case. Everyone looking at this case, except for the what county sheriff?
Lounge.
Except for them, they seem to question this, right? So this is where things start to fall apart. Their case starts to fall fall apart. First of all, I've seen while we were doing our research, I've seen so many people argue, like, first of all, the circumference of his shoulder width, he wouldn't be able to wiggle down into this mat by himself if it was vertical.
Right.
And they're saying his body weight alone would have probably flipped it from being in this vertical position to where it would have fell on the ground.
And you said these were big mats,
huge,
right?
Yeah.
These mats are huge. So it's
but not big enough for a 17-year-old male to wiggle worm himself into. And let me just tell you one other thing. Another point about positional asphyxia is that this is something that happens prolonged. You don't die instantly, right? So they said like, okay, if this was what happened to him, we expect to see the blood to pool to his face and eventually start to leak from the orifices of his face, which are the eyes, mouth, nose, ears, things like that.
Okay.
So they said, okay, this was his cause of death. We should see blood at the bottom of this mat.
Okay.
And this is what really has everyone confused.
Okay.
At the bottom of the mat, there is blood.
Okay, so there is blood. Okay.
There is blood. And at the bottom of the mat, what did I say he was reaching for?
The shoe.
So, if he was reaching for a shoe, you would expect blood to have dripped from the orifices of his body.
Should
if
be
he
stained.
Died.
The
But
shoe
the
should be
shoe
stained.
was on top of the blood as if it was placed there.
Okay. So we're getting into this territory, and with all the things that you showed me, the little, prejudice. Let me stop the Babe in Woods act, because we
Please.
have to.
It's tiring.
We have to, set up the story so you're following along with it. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no way that if you're listening to this, there's no way that you can't hear this and think like, this dude was killed. Like this child was murdered.
Yeah.
Because it's just, and I know you didn't want me to do this, but not here to bash anybody, that may have an alternative theory or whatever. But one of the main reasons why I wanted us to cover this case is because of how infuriated I was with Crime Junkie spending way too much time like trying on this positional asphyxia theory, to where you would think that somebody with a good common sense would dive headfirst into a mat. And okay, let's try on the theory. Essentially, this is what we're gonna do. Let's say he dove into it. Would the dude not try to call out for help?
I was just about to say this.
Would he not try to call out for help? Would KJ not do that?
And if multiple students, if many people put their possessions inside of these mats,
right?
Wouldn't you think that students would be coming and going from these mats all day?
Yes, because it's going with the theory that he was missing some from 1 o'clock in the day or whatever. So there had to be someone. If it wasn't a student, if it was a janitor, one of the coaches, somebody in one of these, would come through. But the other thing too is you said positional asphyxia happens over a long period of time, right?
Yeah.
So
now, I don't want to say long, hours, but you've been in the water and you held your breath. You know how long you don't die instantly. That it takes a minute.
Yeah, okay. But let's say I did want to just try on the positional asphyxia accidental death. What theory, what physical evidence, what, did the investigation determine? What did they see when they arrived there? What came them to it must have been positional asphyxia. Why?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm just guessing because, like I said, one of his arms was extended as if he was reaching for whatever was at the bottom of that mat, and the fact that there was blood at the bottom. Let's just act let's ignore the fact that the shoe was clean. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah. Let's just say gravity ain't working how gravity usually work on this day.
Okay.
And that blood, KJ's blood, dodged that shoe like the plague. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of mental gymnastics. I think.
Yeah.
And I think that what did the autopsy say? What because I mean, would not in my head, if I see something like this. Mm-hmm. My first thought isn't, wow, by golly, these kids are diving into these mats again.
Yeah.
If this was a common thing, it feels like other students would have attempted or done something or almost did that or, something like that. You know what I'm saying? That's what I would think. And, to not let's start poking some holes in this because, as I said, I've been setting the scene and everything like that. But let me just, say what I'm thinking. I would think that immediately you would at least pursue it as if it was a murder investigation.
Right.
Because, like you said, positional asphyxia, whatever the determined cause of death or whatever, like that type of stuff is rare. Like, it
takes 3 to 4 minutes to die of that.
Right. But you would think like red flags. Okay. That's something that if it's so rare, then you should knock out other things before coming into that. Before coming into that conclusion. So, like with some of the pictures we've seen, like it doesn't look like he jumped into a mat,
This is where I have to say something, Brandon. And this is what makes me just so mad, because it's not even rocket science. Okay, yeah. Look at this picture with me. And for the people who are listening to this episode, you can literally Google images from the Kendrick Johnson case, but I will just tell you that the images are very gruesome.
Yes, and we'll try to post some pictures that we can for you to see it, because this is probably not the perfect time to say it, but for the YouTube version we'll try to throw in some of the pictures at this spot so you can kind of see what we're saying. But in any case,
so just looking at this, Matt, so like as I mentioned earlier, there was a hoodie and there was another pair of shoes that were found on top of KJ. And when I say on top of, I mean like you can see his feet protruding from the end of this rolled up mat, and it just seems like these shoes were just placed on top of like his body.
Gotcha.
And this mat, you can tell, I did not have to be on the scene to see. You can see from this photo, this mat is so tightly rolled around his body. There is no way this man slipped into this mat, because the mat right now is hugging, just from the picture, it's hugging the bottom of his legs.
It does look like that. And my thing is, one, could I even see the shoe at the bottom? Like, oh shit, like I know I dropped it. Sorry, like I know I would drop it. Like let's say if I'm saying he dropped the shoe in there, like, oh, I dropped my shoe or whatever, could I even see at the bottom of it where it's at? Then two, like even if I did try to jump into it, it doesn't look like I would fit.
Yes.
And it doesn't. And if I would really just hell bent on trying to get into that mat, there would be some other mats will be knocked down, or there would be like like all that just simple stuff. So it confuses me as to why investigators would determine or at least lean into an accident.
And let me tell you something, I'm gonna be honest with you, looking at this picture, so the question came up, well, how did his shoes that he had on come off and are on top of him like that? And they say, oh, as he was trying to get out, like he came out of his shoes. It doesn't even look like he have enough room. You know how you might take off your shoes, you take your foot to take it off at the heel to take off your shoe? Right. He doesn't even have enough room to extend his leg to even take off his shoe from his heel. Like, that anyone, even a blind man, can see that this mat was rolled around Kendrick Johnson. And that's what makes me so mad about this case, when I see the evidence and I see the pictures. And I read and I find out that his death was ruled an accident. That's no accident. And Brandon, I think there's one more thing that I want you to see and for us to talk about. I feel like we would be doing Kendrick Johnson an injustice if we did not take a moment to talk about this post-mortem photo.
And this photo is really graphic. I think looking at the photo really kind of reinforces the feeling and intuition and like kind of speculation just as to why this death was not accidental. His face looks beaten, bruised, distorted. It doesn't even look like him at all. It doesn't look like how he looked before he died, and just pictures in comparison. And there are two versions of this. You'll see the one that's before the autopsy and the one that's after it. Now the one that was after the autopsy was probably the most circulated around, but even just that original photo before the autopsy is pretty rough to look at. And just this entire situation, just calling a spade, just really feels eerily like Emmett Till.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it just something doesn't just sit right with it, and it makes you wonder, if the same situation happened with a young white student, it makes you think, would this case have been handled differently?
Right.
And we haven't really gotten into a lot more of the other holes that are with the case, but just if this is how a student was found, 17, still a child, found in a gym mat at the school, and authorities, why was this not considered a homicide investigation before going into or ruling it an accident?
Yeah, and just one other thing I like to say about the photo. You know how you mentioned there were two photos? There's a post-mortem photo, and then there's one that was done after the autopsy. The one after the autopsy, understandably, we know why he looked so disfigured. Is because organs are removed during the autopsy and so many different things, right? But this post-mortem one, the one before the autopsy, it showed that Kendrick Johnson had swollen eyes, swollen lips. He looked like he'd actually been beaten up. And I'm no coroner, I'm no medical examiner, but anyone can tell that Kendrick Johnson was treated roughly prior to his death. And it doesn't take anyone with a medical degree to tell that about him. And looking at this picture, it really just tugged at my heartstrings, because when I saw him, when I saw this photo, I saw an image of little brown boys that I know and that I love. And I thought to myself, how would I react if that was one of my loved ones and I saw this, I saw them like this? I'm sorry. I'm not going to just keep silent and keep floating with the narrative of, oh, this was an accident, oh, positional asphyxia. No. Kendrick Johnson was beaten up.
And as us looking and examining everything that is in front of us, if we have these doubts and these questions and just not understanding where things went wrong in this, you can only imagine that the family had tremendously more doubts, questions, and just ready to get to the bottom of everything. So you said that they ordered a separate autopsy?
Yes, so they were able to raise funds because, it's not cheap to hire a private pathologist, but they were able to raise funds with the help of different organizations to enlist the help of a private pathologist, and his name was Dr. William Anderson. So he actually conducted two different autopsies, right? So the first initial one, he concluded that KJ's death was no accident, but it was actually caused by a karate chop to the neck, and I don't know how. Listen, this is why this is not my field of study. I don't know how he concluded all of that, but what was pivotal and important about the findings by this pathologist is that it just reaffirmed what his family and many other people already speculated, that this death was not caused by accidental asphyxia. So Dr. Anderson actually concluded another autopsy. And this time he concluded that KJ died from non-accidental blunt force trauma between the neck and abdomen. And that was his conclusive finding. And that's basically, to me, it almost sounds like his first findings, right? Except for maybe it wasn't as specific as a karate chop hit or something. Yeah. But basically, it just put a name to this thing. Non-accidental blunt force trauma between his neck and his abdomen. And one thing I just want to say is it's really important, Brandon, that a private pathologist conducted another autopsy, because he was kind of he wasn't affiliated with the family. He wasn't affiliated with the local county. You know what I'm saying? It's important to have some unbiased eyes, And by him conducting this 2 times independently and coming up with the same conclusion, that just really solidified for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, that what we're seeing, it just validated our initial feelings and thoughts.
Right. I think you have to, and our listeners, you can go through and do your own research and, you know, like studies through this stuff, but it's just, you know, a lot of investigations and a lot of things with these cases and everything like that, a lot of these end up always being solved based on a hunch, based on like doubts, based on questions, you know, things that need to be answered in a gut feeling. And it's okay if you do the investigation and then you figure out, oh, it actually was, but to automatically assume, and I can't stress this enough, that the initial autopsy, the initial everything, it just raises questions as to how and why would investigators and the coroner initially even come to that conclusion when the second and the third autopsy paints a very different picture. Now, I was waiting to bring in these details, but one of the best videos about the Kendrick Johnson case is the anonymous video.
Wait, I'm sorry, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
When you were when I found out there was an anonymous video,
my
mom was blown because I'm like, this case has taken a it is outside of just the little town.
It took a life on its own, just because that just lets you know that many people hearing the details and seeing the photos and, you know, just all the questions, you know, like they call bullshit on it too. And the fact that you get anonymous, who is, you know, infamous or notorious for going after world leaders, governments, you know, like celebrities and different scandals, to the fact that, you know, this group, which, you know, people may have their own like opinions of. I don't want to put like a label, but you know, I think they're non-traditional activists for whatever things. But anyways, the whole point of it is, when you see this video, it lays out so many different things. And, you know, it referenced the CNN video, which CNN, you know, grabbed the case too, and, you know, the reporters came in, you know, to just like ask questions. This case had a lot of coverage, but the crucial things, the gist that I got out of it was that the investigators and the sheriff Chris Prine, and just when they went into the scene, it was not protected as a crime scene.
Wow.
There was not the level of, you know, protection, you know, like, you know, wearing like protection over their shoes to make sure they don't contaminate evidence. There was no care to the evidence. There were things that weren't tested. You know, not all the blood like in the gym was even tested, you know, for who it was, you know, and stuff like that, because the anonymous video even mentions specifically that there were bloody paper towels in one of the bathrooms, and that was immediately written off as to, oh, there was an accident, you know, from the sports game the night before. Well, why not test everything? Why not go in with the let's examine all options instead of the way that it seemed? Because there's a key thing, and there's a key thing that I even brought up yet, is that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and, you know, like the local authorities, law enforcement, came in hours before the coroner even showed up.
What?
Yes. So there's that whole piece of this was not protected as a crime scene going into it. And when the paramedics eventually arrived, that was the conclusion they thought. Why was this not, you know, they thought it was a crime scene, but it wasn't protected as such. So, you know, it's almost like, and it's kind of dangerous getting into this because, you know, that's where the conspiracies, you know, like come in and everything like that. And I'm not trying to discount those, because this is one of those situations where kind of a conspiracy could be warranted. But at the same time is, you know, this huge time gap, you know, why was the coroner not brought in when the authorities came in? You know, why was everything not preserved and checked for evidence? Why was the narrative for positional asphyxia given so much credence that the initial autopsy, you know, is a completely different one than the ones later on? You know, it's like, you know, just the question marks, you know, little red flags going off in your head, right? And, you know, even in the CNN interview, which is referenced in the anonymous video, you can look it up on YouTube. It shows just how much video footage and surveillance was missing from, and we kind of talked about it before, but, from, Kendrick walking into the gym and, just hours being missing, about the family having to sue to get the full footage, there's a lot of things that just don't add up. But the most telling thing to me is, and you can say this or that or whatever, but video evidence of the CNN interview of the sheriff Chris Prine not even being willing to answer any questions. If it's an accident and this has happened in a high school and a child died in your county, just his tone,
That makes my blood boil.
it's so like kind of tone deaf, but it's also like you're not helping your case. So, in his case with what they determined, so all of those things in mind just doesn't add up. And I think the later autopsies and just, all this level of attention that it's gotten has really just pointed to the problems that are in this case.
So much so, Brandon. And like you said, there are so many caveats to this case. There are so many rabbit holes that you can just spiral on. And I don't even want to call them rabbit holes, because I think they are worth thinking about. And like you said, conspiracies and stuff. But what just was really disrespectful, I felt disrespect, and I can only imagine how the citizens who elected this sheriff felt. How the way he acted in some of these interviews was like he didn't even have the time to even respond to some of these people's very valid questions.
Right.
And let me tell you something. If that was one of my elected officials, let me say it again, elected officials, you are not there by any you weren't born into this position. You were elected by people who trusted you, and you just brushed it off. Somebody lost their life. That was so disrespectful. That really just made me so mad. And I was like, wow, this sheriff should be ashamed of himself.
Right. And you said something even
all the
key
smoke,
to
sir.
that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think really fundamentally what you said, someone lost their life in this. A child lost their life. So, at least the attention and care to detail you would think would be a minimum, of just what their job is.
Yeah.
And for all of these questions, these inconsistencies, so to speak, that are present, it just, it doesn't help disprove any of the conspiracies.
Right.
And regardless of what your take or stance on this is, if you lean more into the conspiracies of there being a cover-up, with some of his classmates being involved, whatever it is, we'll never know for sure, because the evidence on the scene was never tested.
Yeah.
There was never a full-fledged investigation into what happened. So all we do have is the speculation and the hearsay. But even more so, the inconsistencies are still there.
Right.
The autopsies are still there.
Right.
And I think that warrants a reopening the investigation in my book.
Most definitely.
Because, there's reasonable doubt as to what happened. I don't think with those autopsies and just seeing the photos and all of these things that you can with a straight face just tell me, no, it was positional asphyxia.
Right. And yeah. So, I mean, there's so many, like we just said, there's so many other, we could keep this episode going, and we can just keep talking about the different theories, and we can discuss different affidavits that were signed.
Right.
But I don't think that's gonna get us anywhere. I think all we can do is report on the facts and just talk about, and highlight things, that can be proven. You know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly.
So that's what we wanted to do. And one thing that I think is worth us mentioning, Brandon, is a group of people who, even after you finish listening to this episode and you go on about your day, a group of people's lives who have been changed by this, and this is their life, is Kendrick Johnson's family.
Absolutely.
And one thing that they are determined to do is to continue to fight for Kendrick Johnson and to get justice for just to figuring out like what happened to him, justice for his, and to make his life matter, you know?
Right.
So they started a foundation. It's called the Kendrick Johnson Foundation. You can just Google it. It was started in 2014 by his mother, Jackie Johnson. So if you feel compelled to you just feel like, yeah, something else is going on here. They have tons of legal fees. They have actually been sued a few times.
And they've been fighting tirelessly to try to get the case reopened, to, you know, and everything like that. And they've been, you know, it's not really been as fruitful as they, you know, would hope. So, you know, I know that they're continuing their fight, and, you know, that, you know, despite how long it's taken, you know, there's still any contributions or anything like that, you know, would be greatly appreciated towards finally getting the answers that they're seeking.
Yeah, like my mom always told me, she's like, money talk, BS walk. So the one thing that we could do, and I think our listeners could do, is just help support the cause of the Johnson family by donating to the Kendrick Johnson Foundation.
Absolutely.
So we want to thank everyone for listening, but there's one thing I want to say. After hearing all of this, after doing our research, I don't think it's a question of what happened to Kendrick Johnson, Brandon. I think the true question is, who killed Kendrick Johnson?